So MEF Data from Connections to Networks and Roaming. So hello to everybody joining us today for the MEF Connects event. As Isabel said, I'm Gavin Patterson, Director of Data here at MEF, which should give you a pretty good idea as to where we're going over the next 15 minutes. You're going to see lots of lovely data. So like Nasia just had a little journey. The idea this afternoon, again, is to take you on another brief journey. Definitely a weekend break, more than a gap year. Starting with connections, moving on to networks, watch the sunrise and finish with a bit of roaming. So all the data I'm going to share is basically built from the bottom up. And if you're a MEF member, you have access to all the individual operator and country details that you're going to see. But because we only have a limited time today, I'm concentrating on show the big picture. So let's get started. And our first stop is connectivity. So this slide is showing the total number of connections worldwide in each of the 218 markets that we track in MEF, and by the type of connection since 2017. So you can see total SIMs, total SIM connections over this period has grown 54%. So it's increased by 4.3 billion from 8.1 in 2017 to 12.4 billion last year. Handsets in the green, grown 17% over the period to 8.3 billion. I mean, this is also broken down to narrowband and broadband and operating systems, but we're not showing that here. But total handset connections have fallen from 87% of the total in 2017 now to 67%. USBs, which you can sort of see in the middle there in blue, seen 29% growth, now up to about 404 million, and fallen from total 4% market share to 3%. But cellular M2M in pink at the bottom has seen a massive 430% growth over that period, 3.8 billion connections at the end of last year. And M2M has increased from 9% of total connections at the beginning of the period there to 30% last year. And moreover, cellular M2M represents 70% of the total growth in connections of 4.3 billion we've seen over the period. So as we heard from, I think, Dario at the beginning of the day, operators are diversifying their portfolios, are expanding beyond traditional voice and data to embrace enterprise solutions, private networks, new revenue streams, linked to IoT and specifically cloud connectivity. So I'll concentrate on cellular M2M for the moment. Move on to the next one. So as I just mentioned, cellular M2M has seen 430% growth in connections since the beginning of the period that we're tracking here, 2017, rising from 700 million then to 3.8 billion last year. So in terms of regions, the highest growth has been in green here that you can see, Asia Pac. It's up 565%, 3 billion cellular M2M connections in Asia Pac last year, and increasing its overall share of the total M2M connections from 64% to 80%. So 80% of M2M connections are in Asia Pac. The Middle East, almost invisible at the top in pink, has actually grown 415% over the period, 100 million connections last year. That's approximately 2% of the total. Europe in yellow has seen nearly 200% growth. That's 400 million cellular M2M devices. And overall M2M market share has actually fallen in Europe, accounted for 17% in 2017, now 10%. And Americas in blue at the bottom, 166% growth to around 300 million units. Again, market share dropping from around 17% to 8%. So Asia Pac is by far the largest cellular M2M market. And not only is it the single largest market for cellular M2M, but also has above average penetration too. So up from 10% of its total regional connections. So that includes everything from handsets, modems and machine to machine in 2017 to 39% last year. So cellular M2M was 39% of total connections in Asia Pac. Last year. Europe has the second highest penetration of connections, up from 10% in 2017 to 26% last year. So a quarter of all connections in Europe are cellular M2M, followed by the Americas, 21%, at the end of last year, so a fifth of all connections there are cellular M2M. And then you've got Middle East and Africa at the bottom, still room for a lot of growth, up from 1% now to 5% of its total regional connections. So as well as the connections by market, we also track the network technology of every single MNO worldwide. And we're in the process of expanding that as well to fixed wireless access operators too. So if 2G or 3G has been shut, or if 4G or 5G has been launched, as such, we can also take this view, which moves us on to networks. So this is 5G, looking at how it has really opened up a whole new chapter in the digital transformation of our industry. Mobile internet no longer just connects people with people and machines with machines, but we're accelerating the number of applications and usage of IoT. So 5G has obviously enriched cellular M2M with significantly higher speeds, lower latencies, increased battery operational times, allowing huge number of devices to be connected per cell. Now, as a result, the rollout of 5G mobile networks has driven a rapid expansion in the number of cellular M2M connections over the past 7 years that we see here, to the extent that now 48% of all cellular M2M is housed on 5G. 5G is now the single largest cellular M2M carrier, overtaking 4G last year. The number of 4G connections peaked in 2022, while 3G connections have virtually halved since their peak in 2018. At the same time, however, cellular M2M on 2G continues to grow, admittedly not hugely, but 2G machine-to-machine connections are now 5 times those of 3G, with many operators maintaining 2G for point-to-point M2M or IoT applications while shutting it off on the retail voice and data communications side. So because we track sunsets and sunrises, there's examples here on the right of what you can see, MNO launches and closures in blue and red, and their live nets or sunsets. Because we track all this, we can see the landscape for RAN availability. So 661 live MNOs at the end of last year. Now that's not including all the regional operators in the States, and not including fixed wireless yet either. But of these, we've got 121 2G networks have now closed. That's 18% of the total. We've got 129 3G networks have now also shut down, overtaking 2G last year. So almost 20% of 3G is gone. While on the 4G side, we have almost ubiquitous availability. 628 of 661 networks now with 4G, and we've got just over half, 355 at the bottom there, now with 5G as well. So as an industry, we're steadily moving up that connectivity pipe, slowly moving away from just the 2G cellular or 3G mobile broadband to faster networks with greater capacity, lower latency, which supports a multitude of new sectors on public and private networks, reliant on real-time analytics and automation. But the view of a sunset differs greatly depending where you are standing. So let's go and stand somewhere. In terms of 2G, on the left here, you can see the Americas, so USA, Canada, and the Caribbean, and Latin America, lead in terms of sunsets, with 40% of MNOs now in that region shuttering 2G, overtaking Asia Pac in 2023, which has now seen 30% of MNOs close down their 2G nets. But look at Europe and MEA, Middle East Africa, at the bottom there on the right in the green and the pink. Just around 5% of networks have closed 2G. A lot more are planned to go offline in Europe this year, but still a long way behind. On the right, we've got 3G network sunsets and a totally different situation. Almost 40% of the European MNOs have now closed their 3G nets, about 25% in Asia Pac, with Americas just shy of 15%, and again around 5% closures in the Middle East and Africa. So Europe focused on 3G closures, while the rest of the world was leading with 2G. What about sunrises? We've seen the sunset. Let's look at the sunrise. So as I mentioned, earlier, 4G is now pretty ubiquitous worldwide, average of 95% rollouts, and not too much difference here really between the regions. But 5G on the right is a completely different story. We've got over 80% of MNOs in Europe have now commercial 3G, just over 50% in Asia Pac, and just over 40% in the Americas, and almost 40% in the MEA. So it's worth pointing out here that Europe is the most connected market, but penetration of cellular M2M still lags Asia Pac, while the MEA here has over 90% 4G availability on MNOs and half again with 5G, but 2G and 3G still not being turned off due to the high number of unconnected users. By unconnected, I mean in terms of mobile broadband. So not only do we track sunsets and sunrises here, but if there is 4G, what about VoLTE? And where there is 5G, is it standalone? And is there voice over new radio? So let's have a little quick look at that. So the transition from circuit switch to VoLTE-based networks is well on its way, as you can see here. You've got over 40% of all 4G networks are now offering VoLTE, voice over LTE, which means if they've sunset 2G and 3G, that roaming deals will need to be in place to overcome coverage gaps. And for a successful 5G rollout, IMS-based VoLTE needs to be replacing existing 2G and 3G voice services. But you can see here that 5G standalone is still a long way behind. Just 16% of 5G networks last year were standalone. And I'm aware time is quickly running out. So if you want to see which operators and where, all of this information is available on MEF Data. So in the time we've got left, I wanted to have a quick look at roaming. This is from our annual consumer survey. It's the biggest piece of research that we do within MEF. It's now in its 11th year and covering over 55% of the global population, 60% of active mobile users. Now, I've taken the data here just for two markets to show you. We've got Germany and the UK, basically showing what is going on there with roaming. So Germany, we've got nearly 69 million adult users in 2025. 64 million of them roam. That's about 93% of the total. In the UK, we've got about 54.3 million adult users. These are mobile users in the UK, and 48.8 million of them roam. That's about 90% of the total. So that's the overall opportunity, I guess, in terms of roaming. Germany, as we said, there are nearly 69 million adult users, and these are the ones that actually roam or know how they roam. We've got 64 million. You can see here in terms of how they roam. So roam like home, there's 37%, only use Wi-Fi, 22%. Just take their phone and pay the extra. 10% buy a new SIM, 8% buy an eSIM, 6% international roaming bundle, 6%. Now that equates to roughly 6.9 million people are paying the extra. 5.5 million people are buying new SIMs, 4 million are buying eSIMs, and another 4 million are buying international bundles. So only 20.6 million people are actually paying to roam. The vast majority, almost 60%, roam like home are only using Wi-Fi. So that 20.6 million is 32% of total roamers. In the UK, you've got a sort of similar position. We've got 54.3 million adults and 48.8 million of them roam. And you can see how they roam here again. Roam like home, 30%, only use Wi-Fi, 22%. You can see the numbers there. I don't need to go through them. But what it equates to is 8.3 million people are just paying the extra. 6.9 million are buying international bundles, 4.8 million are buying new SIMs, and just 2.8 million are using eSIMs. So that adds up to about 22 million people who are paying when they roam. 2 million more than in Germany. There's obviously a high proportion of roam like home because of the EU, but 46% of the UK adults here are paying roamers. So for Germany and the UK, we know the adult users and those that roam, and for all types of roaming, we ask how much do they spend? Is it up to €5, up to £10, you know, whichever market you're in, 30, 40, 50. And from that, we can see an average spend per person. And this is the situation in Germany. So Germany, the top spend per person is where people just take their phone and don't care about the extra costs, paying on average about 25.9 euros per year. That's also the top earner, coming at 180 million euros. Next, we've got eSIMs. Again, you can see the numbers, so I won't go through them. But what that means is in terms of the total spend of about 460 odd million in the US, total roaming spend, almost 39% is coming just from paying extra fees. 22% on eSIMs, 21% on buying new SIMs, and then you've got roaming bundles on 18%. Finally, just a quick view of the UK as well. Again, you can see the average spend here per person on the different types of roaming and what they're doing. I'm aware the time's ticking, so I'm going to hurry up. And you can see the breakdown there as well. So most of the spend is coming on just paying extra fees, 31% on bundles, new SIMs 21%, and then eSIMs bottom, very little usage, 12%. So as I said, all of this data is available. You can find it here soon on the new website. If you've got any questions, happy to answer in the meantime. Otherwise, I think that is all I've got time for.